No, we've seen stuff like this before. Dave Dombrowski did it in Detroit, actually, and came in, and I don't believe he fired Randy Smith right away. Now, in that situation, Dombrowski just became the general manager himself, but he was, and still is, actually the team president. And I don't know what structure MacPhail is going to go with. Just from talking to some folks in the industry and people who know him, it sounds more likely that he will hire somebody to be the de facto GM underneath him, maybe a younger guy, maybe somebody he worked with while he was in Baltimore, and that he will be the president and will still be involved in kind of macro issues in baseball ops. But when Andy was in Baltimore, too, he was not the sort of Theo Epstein or Andrew Friedman mold of GM. Andy was not going out and seeing draft players in the spring, for example. So I think he would be kind of over the top of baseball operations and may clear everything out underneath him. That seems possible, if not likely, but that he would hire somebody who's going to be much more involved on a day-to-day basis with more micro baseball decisions.
Keith, in today's game, I think Andy said yesterday, he said, I'm flattered, but quite frankly, I'm surprised. I have been out of the game for 3 years. I'm kind of surprised I was offered this position. Is he the right guy to turn this Phillies franchise, which is kind of stuck in the Stone Ages, around?
Well, that entirely depends on who he hires. If he goes out and hires how about a group of intelligent, progressive, mostly younger baseball guys from other organizations, preferably from other organizations that have had success, too, because you want to bring in people who don't just bring ideas, but they bring knowledge, and they bring institutional knowledge from other organizations, sort of best practices that then you can steal, because the Phillies, as you said, are way behind the curve. So they have to catch up to what every other organization in baseball has been doing now for 3, 5, even 10 years before they can even think about being better at anything than other organizations. If MacPhail goes out and hires some of these people, and like I said, it's about assembling a team. It's not just one GM. If he does that, then yes, he was the right guy, and he might really be the right guy too, because it's clear that ownership wants an older guy at the helm, somebody they feel like they have a better relationship with, somebody who's been around the game for a very long time and is well-liked by other organizations and by the commissioner's office. It could all work great. Now, if MacPhail doesn't do that, if he hires a bunch of old cronies, then this franchise isn't going to go anywhere. I'm just hopeful that he's going to do the former.
Yeah, it sounded like yesterday John Middleton, who is kind of a faceless owner up until yesterday, he kind of put himself out there, and he said the Phillies are going to launch their own sabermetrics system in September. I mean, does this kind of tell you that the Phillies are ready to finally embrace this, or is this kind of a laughable claim?
Well, first of all, it tells you Ruben Amaro is dead man walking at this point, right? Because he has fought this, openly fought and mocked this for most of his tenure, and it is going to cost him his job. And it should, actually, because I think the idea of mocking something that is industry standard, never mind best practice, within your business is basically a firing offense. So on that front, I think it's possible. I think it's a positive sign. I think it says that the direction of the organization is going to change in a way that it has to change. John Middleton has some success in the business world. I can't imagine he looks at 29 other teams employing analytics departments and says, yeah, we don't need to do that stuff. I mean, this has to be a huge part of what they want to do going forward. And again, it comes down to MacPhail, who is an intelligent guy, but was not a huge adopter of sabermetrics while he was in Baltimore. He wasn't a huge proponent. They didn't have a big analytics department there. We've got to see him either go out and make that investment, in financial investment and also kind of intellectual investment. Yes, we're going to do this stuff, or hire the GM who's going to do it, like they did in Los Angeles, where Andrew Friedman went there and brought in Farhan Zaidi from the A's, and Farhan was one of the architects of the information system in Oakland, not a traditional baseball guy at all, a business guy with a PhD who came in and really sets the tone for how they're going to make decisions going forward.
Keith Laws with us, ESPN.com. And, of course, the Phillies make Andy MacPhail the new team president effective at the end of the year. Ryan Sandberg last week on Friday abruptly resigns. How do you read into that? Is he told, hey, something's happening? Does he get out? Because yesterday Andy MacPhail said, look, I have the utmost respect for him. I was a little surprised by this. So how do you read the whole Sandberg stepping down? I'm
not sure. There's a lot of surprise across the industry. I'm hesitating because I can't say I have a strong feeling about this in any direction. It sort of lends itself to hot takes, and I don't want to give you a hot take on this because my guess is there was probably more behind the scenes that we can see. I'm going to assume, and this is my own speculation here, that Sandberg saw there was an organizational change coming, figured he's probably not going to last anyway. By getting himself out of the way, he makes it easier for them to go out and hire the manager that they want, which is a good thing. Probably spares himself a lot of aggravation down the stretch, which is also a good thing, I just think, for your own mental health. But leaving so abruptly probably doesn't reflect all that well on him because now we're seeing that the front office was completely caught off guard by this and had to scramble just to get a replacement. So where Sandberg could have simply gone to them beforehand, a couple of days earlier, and said, guys, I think if this is happening, MacPhail's coming in, I'm going to step down. I'm going to do what I think is the right thing for everybody, including the organization. I'm going to step down. Here's your notice. You guys can go prepare. And when we have a press conference on Friday or Saturday or whatever, you can introduce whoever the interim manager is. You can work that out. No one's going to say no in that situation. If you're stepping down, you're saving the team some money probably. They're not going to stop you. And at least this way you're giving them some notice so that they don't – I thought the franchise looked embarrassed when all of this happened. They looked like they got caught with their pants down on something. And it's not their fault. But it was not a good look for the Phillies organization.
No, and you're right. It looked like two guys up there who had no idea what was coming. We're talking with Keith Law here. Now they got Pete Mackinnon managing the team. They said through the weekend. Yesterday they said he's going to go through the next 4 games, and then they'll make an announcement. Are they going to hire a full-time guy at this stage of the season? Is there going to be another interim guy? What do you do here if you're the Phillies? And who's a part of – because Andy MacPhail kind of said, I've been out of the game for 3 years. I don't know. Is this a really weird situation?
That part is weird. Look, hiring a full-time guy now would be stupid. I mean, I can't even say a strong enough word for it. Now you just wait until the end of the season when you get your pick of anybody in baseball who isn't already employed as a manager. Any coach – any minor league manager, you can't go get those guys right now. And there's plenty of them out there who are qualified. So it's not that the right guy isn't out there. But you don't get to get him right now unless he's already sitting in the organization or is momentarily unemployed. So that doesn't fit. I would say make somebody, and it can be Mackinnon, it can be whoever, make somebody the interim guy for the rest of the year with the clear understanding you're the interim guy. You're going to be paid to manage the club, paid more to manage the club, but this does not make you the manager going forward. Your job is to get us from now through the end of the season and maybe try to win a few extra games. But then at the end of the season, you go out and make the decision to hire someone full-time. If they make a full-time manager hire now, it is a sign that this organization is dysfunctional for reasons that go way beyond baseball operations, because it's just not at all the right way to approach this.
Keith, if you get brought in, you've been in front offices before, you get brought in as the new team president, and the trade deadline is looming, and you have the biggest fish in the trade market pond, are you allowing your potentially outgoing GM to make that deal?
This is the, how much is left? $60 million question for Hamels, however much is left on his contract, because is Andy MacPhail really going to sit there, Ruben Amaro, say that he gets a deal. He gets basically what he's wanted. He gets somebody to maybe overpay a little bit for Hamels. Is MacPhail just going to green light it? Does he have the right to approve or reject this? And if he has that right, which he probably should as team president, what is he using to make that evaluation? Because by his own admission, he's been out of the game for 3 years. And while it's not like he's been under a rock all that time, I doubt that he knows the Red Sox system inside and out. So what is he going to do? Is he going to use the scouting reports of the pro scouting department that he may be about to gut after the season? I don't know. I don't know the answers to any of that. I would love to know the answer because, again, it's going to tell us something about how this group is functioning. And maybe they just should have fired Ruben Amaro right away and had MacPhail say, I'm the GM from now until the end of the season. Then after the season, I'm going to go out and hire somebody from some other organization, and I'll hire a bunch of guys. But in the meantime, we cannot have a lame duck GM making one of the most important decisions in the history of the franchise.
Well, I guess one of the problems is, as you mentioned, he said yesterday, and he mentioned it, I've been out of the game for 3 years. Yeah. I haven't been paying attention.
I wish he hadn't said that.
Well,
right?
He said I was in Peru. I was in Vietnam. I was traveling the world. He said he was resentful towards the end of his tenure in Baltimore. He just didn't want to go to the ballpark anymore. I mean, it sounded like a guy who wasn't really itching to get back.
I know. And it was funny for me to hear any of that because I don't know if you've talked to him at all. He's a sunny guy. I mean, he has an upbeat disposition, too. And people who worked with him in Baltimore loved him as a person, not just as a boss, but just really liked him. And a lot of them have stayed close to him. So for him to say that it was bad in Baltimore, I cannot imagine what that was like at the end of his time there. And I wish he hadn't said so much of that, even though I'm sure it's all true, because it sort of, again, adds to the impression that, well, who's really steering the ship over there? Now you've hired somebody who I think is very competent, but if he's really been out of the game for that long, what is he going to do when there's a major decision to be made? Is he going to call one of his buddies from another club, somebody he's known for a long time, and said, hey, you know, this Xander Bogaerts guy, is he any good? What do we got on him? Because he probably never seen him play. And it's a bad situation for him to be thrust into. And I just think, again, it's a bad look for the Phillies. This could all get better at the end of the season. I'm not trying to bury them, but a lot of this just doesn't look right. What was the process that got us to this point, and why are we still talking about this franchise maybe making some dysfunctional decisions?
Yeah, obviously you said it. There is precedent. Guys have been hired in the middle of the season before, but it just seems a little odd that the guys come in after 3 years out, maybe before a guy who had been with another organization and still been around the game and had some wherewithal of other organizations. But like you said, he hasn't been paying attention to these other systems to say, you know what, that's a good deal for Hamels. I know a lot about these guys. It seems like that's not the case.
No, and it's hard to do. I mean, that's my full-time job is to keep up with all of these prospects from across the game, and yet there are still guys who pop up on me where Rudy Giron is the guy in the Padres system who they signed last year or 2 years ago out of, I think, the Dominican Republic for about $400,000, not a lot of money. He comes out, he goes right to Fort Wayne this year or wherever they are in the Midwest League, low A, same level as Lakewood. He's 18. He's hitting 350. He's hitting with power. He can stay at shortstop. All of a sudden, this guy is a legitimate prospect. 6 months ago, when I was doing my Padres org report in the top 10 and asking about sleepers, the Padres' own people didn't even talk about this guy. So there's an unbelievable amount of information that you need to have at your disposal if you're a GM or, I guess, a president trying to make a trade. And you will have a department of people, 2 departments, pro scouting and analytics, who are responsible for keeping that information and giving it to you so you can make the decision. How could you possibly do that coming in cold when those aren't your people? You don't even necessarily trust the people. You don't have an analytics department, and you may not even know the people in pro scouting to use them to make that decision.
Keith, Hamels is obviously a big decision. Would McPhail coming in then maybe him say, you know what, I don't want to trade him at the deadline. I want to wait until I get more information, and maybe we'll do something in the offseason? Entirely possible. I had that thought. Does this just freeze the trade market for him? Does it freeze their trade market in total in Philadelphia? I hope not, because there's some look, if somebody's willing to take 2/3 of the Papelbon contract off your hands, just do it. Just clear the money. Get as much of the money off the books as possible. They're talking – Tom Haudricourt wrote in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, he was comparing the Brewers situation where Doug Melvin is likely to step upstairs, be replaced essentially as GM. And he said, well, at least the Brewers don't have the same long – else was looking at the Phillies and saying, wow, thank God we're not them. So if you're in the Phillies situation, it sort of says to you, other teams are looking and saying, you have money problems. You got to clear some of these contracts off the books. And Papelbon is the one in particular. I don't think you need to get a lot back in prospects. Just get the money off the books if you can. And then if you have to worry about the Hamels contract and other trades in the offseason, that's unfortunate, but you can float that. Keith Law, everybody here, as the Phillies make a new leadership move yesterday. It is Andy McPhail in. And as we said, nobody out. Pat Gillick just kind of moving back to his advisory role. And we'll see what happens next for Ruben Amaro Jr. Keith, always a pleasure, man. My pleasure.